Aloha and namaste. I'm Ash, and today's workshop we'll be discussing the 4 principles of practice, or the 4 things to keep in mind whenever you are teaching and cueing a class. These are obviously really great principles for you to keep in mind as a practitioner, but they're very useful principles for teaching and cueing, because if you can remember these 4 principles and keep them in mind as you cue each pose or as you sequence your class, it's going to be the most effective, and your communication will be really absorbed by the student. They will really understand what the effect or the goal is that you are trying to cultivate or simulate through your cueing. So the 4 principles of practice are breath or pranayama, foundation, working from the ground up, and root to rebound. So those are the 4 principles of practice, and I'll say them one more time because there's a test after this. Is pranayama, foundation, working from the ground up, and root to rebound. So let's go over the first principle of practice. The first principle is pranayama, and luckily you've already went through the entire pranayama module, so you know the importance of the breath. And especially when we're working with vinyasa, we want to simulate the posture or the movement by cueing the breath, because the breath will actually naturally move the body in the way that we want the body to move. So the breath actually comes first. And if you can understand the natural movement of an inhale and an exhale, you will know what to cue in every pose. So for example, when we inhale, that's expansion. So what happens on expansion is the limbs want to go out, they want to go up. Every time there's an inhale, there's some sort of expansion. So if you were going to cue lifting the arms up, you would naturally say, inhale, arms rise. And when we exhale, we know that there's a contraction. So anytime we forward fold, or let's say we twist, that's when we would cue an exhale. An inhale would be anything that's going to help lengthen us or even arch our back. So when we're doing a backward bend or like a cobra, to lift the chest up, it would be a natural inhale, because you can feel as you inhale there's a sense of expansion happening, and every time you exhale there's a sense of deepening or effort. Our exhale really gives us the pranayama, the force or the energy cultivation to really power through. So an exhale would be a contraction or a push away. Think about if you were going to push from laying on the belly up to a plank pose, or from a plank pose back to a downward facing dog, you would use your exhale breath to push away. So an inhale is a lift, an expansion, and exhale is a release or a contraction or some sort of sense of effort. So if you can really understand the natural ebbs and flows of the breath, it will really help you to cue your movements effortlessly. You would say, inhale, arms go out. Exhale, right hand down to the mat. Inhale, lift back up. Exhale, both hands back down. Inhale, lift the chest up. Exhale, bend the elbows, chaturanga. So that's one other way to use breath in practice or in teaching, is to use the breath as kind of the rhythmic template for the pacing of the class. So when you have longer breaths or longer capacity of breathing, like slow, long inhales, slow, long exhales, the class should match the tempo of the breath. So if you're working on long, slow breathing and holding poses for extended amounts of breaths, the class should feel really honey-like and fluid. If it's a power flow and it's one breath, one movement, it's more like a dance, and the tempo gets a little bit quicker. So you can really use the breath and how you cue the breath. How often are you saying inhale, exhale, or are you saying inhale, exhale? So as you cue the breath, you will be dictating the tempo and the pace of the class. So that's something to really keep in mind as you're using the breath. So the next thing is starting with the foundation. So starting with the foundation is really just bringing awareness in each pose to what body part is connected to the earth. So we're never levitating, and if we are, we're already enlightened. And there's always going to be a body part that is touching the earth. And whatever body part is touching the earth in the pose is considered the foundation. So right now I'm sitting in easy pose Sukhasana, and my sit bones are the foundation. So the first thing I would start with would be to cue the breath and set the tone. And then I would bring awareness to the foundation by saying, root your sit bones into the earth. That connectivity of the foundation in each pose is going to help give the practitioner awareness of where their body is in space. And it's also going to lead into the next principle, which is cueing from the ground up. They need to know which body part is touching the earth first. And let's say we're in downward facing dog. There might be multiple points that are connected to the foundation. Your hands are touching the earth in downward facing dog, and your feet are touching the floor in downward facing dog. So you're always instructing, the first cue you're going to give to your students is always going to start with the body part that is touching the earth. So if we were going to cue downward facing dog, the very first thing we would tell them is where to put their hands and where to put their feet. How far apart are their hands from their feet? How far apart are their hands from each other? Because once you set the foundation up correctly, the rest of the body will follow and match the shape. So let's say we're in downward facing dog. You want to get them into downward facing dog. How do you get somebody into a shape? You tell them the body parts that are touching the ground first. Place your hands on the mat. Place your hands shoulder width apart. Take your feet hip width apart. That's how you would start to cue the pose. Now they know where their hands and their feet are in space. Then you would build on top of that. Create an upside down V with your body, rise your hips up to the sky, like a dog stretching in a downward facing dog. You would start to give them the visuals after that, but you always start with what body parts are touching the earth. So this is the best advice, is to always, when you're cueing, think about that. The next thing is to cue from the ground up. So this is principle 3, it's working from the ground up. So once you have the foundation of whatever pose you're teaching, let's say we're teaching Tadasana, which is just mountain pose, it's just standing upright, which we're going to get into how mountain pose is a blueprint for many other poses. You're going to cue mountain pose and you're standing in Tadasana. You first cue the breath. Maybe you inhale, you lift the arms up, exhale, the hands come down, and you find Tadasana. Then you cue the foundation, step your feet hip width apart. Root your feet into the ground. You can give a lot more than that. You can say, turn your weight to the outer edges of your feet. Turn your weight to the inner edges of your feet. Shift your weight forward towards the balls of your feet. Shift your weight back towards the heels of your feet, and now equally distribute the weight to all 4 corners of the feet. So now they're really identified with the body part, the feet. They've explored different movements and weight distribution in the feet, and they're rooted into the earth. The third principle is cue from the ground up. So now once you have a firm foundation, you can start to cue the next body part, which is, or the next joint above that, which is the knees. So soft, gentle bend in the knees. Make sure your knees are stacked over your heels. Find your pelvis, find your hips. Bring your hip points up towards your navel and soften your tailbones down towards your heels to get your pelvis in a neutral position right over your knees. So now you're building a foundation and you're stacking the body. And this is a really easy one because we're just standing, and I'll go ahead and stand. I don't know if you can see me, but you can see my feet. Root your feet down into the earth. We said find all the different weight distributions and equally distribute the weight onto all 4 corners of the feet. Soft bend into the knees. Engage the outer thighs. Find your pelvis. Pull your hip points up towards your navel and your tailbone down towards your heels. So you're just working on getting every joint into the right position. Then you can say, bring your belly into your back body, bring your back body into your navel, roll your shoulders back and down, take your skull back so it's directly aligned over the shoulders. soften your chin, soften your face. So as you cue, you get the point, you're working from the ground up. So that's the third principle, because this is going to be the most effective way for a practitioner to understand exactly what you're trying to help them achieve, the shape you're trying to help them achieve in your cueing. And then the fourth principle is root and rebound. So root and rebound is that for every action, there's a reaction, because the yoga practice is all about finding equilibrium. It's all about finding the balance between the two opposing forces. In fact, hatha yoga is sun and moon. So it's the polar energies. It's like that magnet that they have those opposite fields, and when they come together, they resist. So in every single pose that we cue, and just like in Yoga Sutras, which we talked about in philosophy, there is always effort and unattachment, or some sort of effort and some sort of surrender. You're giving 100% effort and you're 100% surrendered. So root and rebound is that kind of concept that for every action, there is a reaction. And one of the best ways to think about that is when we do plank pose. So in plank pose, we push the floor away. And I'm going to demo this. So the action, or the root in plank pose, actually I'm going to turn so I can make sure that I'm in the frame. Great. So in plank pose, the action, the root, is to push the floor away. And as we push the floor away, you can tell that my shoulder blades, my upper back, rebounds and floats. My front body lifts into my back body. And this is kind of the natural effect of pushing away. There's a natural rebound. Another way I think about this is in warrior pose, there's a certain aspect of the pose that is root in effort. Let's just get into a warrior here so you can see. I'm going to go really low so I can try and get into the frame. So you can just see my lower half of my body, but the root is all the legs. The legs are driving into the floor and ripping the mat apart, and that's the root, that's the effort. The rebound is the buoyancy that comes out of the pelvis as the pelvis and the ribs just float and turn forward. The shoulders are soft, the arms are soft, the face is soft. All of this upper body is in a surrendered state, and the lower body is in an action. So in every pose, where can we have more effort and where can we surrender? Even in a child's pose, the effort is to reach the arms forward and crawl and inch the arms away and pull the shoulders down the back. The surrender is the belly just relaxes. So whenever you're giving cues, it's always nice to find the pairs that complement each other. There's so many more examples, and we'll get into them as we break down the poses. But another reason for this is because if we go too much into effort, we get out of the pose. So another good example of this is to call root and rebound effort and return to center, because whenever you do too much effort, you can just keep going on that effort plane and kind of pull yourself out of the pose, and you need some sort of softening or returning to center to keep those polarities exactly in a centered state. So I'm going to show you. Okay, so let's look at this from the back view so you can see what happens to my pelvis when I give a cue of effort, and how my pelvis can get really out of alignment if I don't have a counter cue, or that return to center cue, or that rebound cue. So let's just take a look from the back side. So here, this is usually how the pose is. You'll see students doing this, the hips all out, and the cue is to descend the right femur bone down. So as we drop it down, what ends up happening is the hip goes the other way. So the return to center cue is to hug the opposite leg, the outer thigh, in. Boop. And so as we do both actions, descend the femur down, hug the outer thigh in, we find a neutral pelvis. And so that's kind of how these cues and counter cues work together. And we'll see that pretty much in every pose as we explore all the different poses in the series. So you can call it root and rebound, you can call it effort and surrender, you can call it effort and return to center. But that is the principle for getting us into the proper alignment when we are cueing, is working with gravity and finding that center. So in the next videos, we'll be going over all the different pose families and how to use these, I'm out of breath from that, how to use these 4 principles in all of our cueing, in all of our poses, and see how that plays out. So we'll be talking about the movement principles of certain pose families and how we can use these 4 principles in our cueing. Namaste.